Hey everyone, thank you for watching this. In this episode, we have a guest on that's been to treatment one time. And if you've been listening to any length of time at all, you know that a lot of people have been to treatment more than once. He's got a heck of a story. He had a bright future ahead of him and lost a lot of it due to his addiction. So stay tuned to the end, and he is going to give you some pointers on how you can, if it's you or somebody you love is going into treatment for the first time, how you can make it stick. And we go in a bunch of other directions. It's pretty cool. Enjoy the show. That chair is squeaky. You ready? You ready, Mike?
I'm born ready.
Is my mic on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we have Benjamin B.
What's happening, everyone?
And we have a guest to my left. Maybe you're right. Mike.
That's right. What's going on?
Mike is right.
Sometimes. It depends. You talk to my wife, it's a lot less often than I like to think.
Talk to the wife. Probably Mike's always wrong.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, first things first. Thank you for tuning in to the podcast app. If it's on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play Music, we're there. And thank you for watching on YouTube. And in the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can always email us, Ben.
Yes, you can, Tom.
Tom at realrecoverytalk.com and Ben at realrecoverytalk.com. And what we're going to do is we are going to ask you for your phone number, okay? Because you're going to send us an email. You're going to tell us your whole life story about what's going on and how you need help. And it's going to be 5 pages long. And Ben and I are going to come into the office the next morning and we're going to say, did you see that email? And we're both going to say yes. And it's some of them are very painful to read. Right, Ben?
I'd agree.
So if you need to talk to us, just give us a sentence or two. Give us a quick snapshot of what's going on and put your phone number in there. And then all we're going to do is send you a text. And the text is going to say something along the lines of, hey, this is Tom from Real Recovery Talk. I got your email. Let's connect and we'll schedule a time, you know?
It's just hard, like you always say, to have a meaningful conversation through email.
Yeah, you can't. It's impossible. And listen, we want to devote time and effort into your situation. And in the end, we may not be able to help you directly, but at least we can kind of give you some guidelines, some pointers, and maybe give you some tangible things to take away from the conversation. And we're here to do that. Right, Ben?
Correct.
We're here for the people. Right, Ben?
Yes.
All right, Mike, here we are. So thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. And again, another guest that Ben and I really don't know a whole lot about, but the good thing is that we're all cut from the same cloth to a certain degree. And Mike works in Florida here at another facility. And are you able to talk about it?
Yeah, we can talk about it.
So Mike wanted to come on and share a little bit of his story, and he's got a pretty cool story. We're from the same state, Pennsylvania. Now, he's from the opposite side over by Harrisburg, and, you know, I'm over by Pittsburgh. So it's really two different worlds, I would think. I think. What do you think? Are you an Eagles fan?
I'm not. No Eagles, no Steelers. Those are the two that I get pigeonholed for. But I was growing up, and Penn State University's quarterback, they won the Rose Bowl in 94, 95. Kerry Collins was their quarterback. He was their first ever draft pick for the Carolina Panthers. They were brand new. I felt they needed some love. So
You're Carolina
Panthers.
Okay.
Hasn't been too fruitful, but a couple good seasons here and there.
That's all right. Hey, you know, I would have stuck you as an Eagles fan. But
A lot of Eagles fans, a lot of Steelers fans, and we're 70 miles from Baltimore, so a weird Central Pennsylvania Raven fan is thrown in the mix there, but
yeah.
0 for 3 for me there.
All right. Well, what about 76ers? You a basketball guy?
If I had to claim a team, it would be the Sixers, but basketball is probably third on the list below. Well, if you count college sports, so I'm a big baseball guy, football, and college basketball more than pro, and I'm proud alumnus of West Virginia University. So
WVU. I got thrown out of there a couple times. Well, like not thrown out, but respectfully asked to leave.
They are respectful about it when they do it, and I was threatened for sure during my time there. I graduated by the skin of my teeth, but yeah, it's a fun school.
Yeah.
Easy to get in, tough to stay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, man. Well, glad you're here. Take us back a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And I want you to always think in this, on this podcast, a lot of the listeners are families and loved ones. We do have a lot of addicts that are in active addiction that don't know what to do or what the next step to take is. So, also think of that. But I would say the primary base, if I'm thinking in terms of percentages, I would say 60% of our listeners are going to be families and loved ones. So think through or speak through that lens and or look through that lens. I don't know. But take us back a little bit. Give us a little bit of your backstory and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, I'll try to keep this brief. One of my favorite topics is talking about myself, so we're going to keep it brief. But born and raised, like you mentioned, right outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Great life. I always tell people if I'm like sharing my story that if you think about like the Hallmark Channel, afternoon movie of the week, family, white picket fence, golden retriever, that was like my life growing up. Golden retriever my whole life. Still, I have one now, actually. But so nothing about my upbringing would indicate what happened to me happened. But, it all unfolded the way it unfolded. Parents still together, 2 sisters, neither of them are afflicted with alcoholism or drug addiction. So from the outside looking in, it's like, what happened? How did that happen to you? It just happened. Much like I listened to a lot of your podcasts the last few days, and is a little bit of a recurring theme. I could identify a lot with a lot of what your guests were saying. But for me, it didn't really take off until college. And then it sort of remained what I thought was manageable. In reality, not at all manageable. And it just continued to get worse and worse and worse. And then my behavior also got worse and worse and worse. And that escalated to, breaking the law, things like that. And that lifestyle doesn't last forever, and led to an eventual arrest and then treatment. And I haven't looked back since then.
So when you say college, are we talking drugs and alcohol, just alcohol? What were you doing?
For me, everything. So it started 14 years old drinking, in my buddy's basement. Not too much longer after that, slowly indoctrinated to the world of drugs. High school, marijuana, some spare pills that a friend finds here and there. And then it just escalated from there. I never met or encountered a substance that I didn't like. It's just the hierarchy of where I put them on my likability scale. So for me, it's drugs and alcohol.
What was the first in the basement? What was the first drink? Do you remember?
Probably something in a plastic bottle, raspberry flavored vodka that, was horrendous going down, and then it just stayed that way.
Yeah.
Nothing too nice.
You remember Zima?
Zima, absolutely. It has a big score if you encountered one of them.
That was my first drink. I remember it like it was yesterday, Ben. What was yours, Ben? Your first drink? Do you remember? Or did you go straight to heroin?
Codeine, promethazine was actually like my first experience under the influence.
Really?
Scissorp, as the
That's a
kids
drink.
call it. Yeah.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Purple stuff all in my cup.
There's a song with that.
Yeah, 3 6 Mafia.
Quite a bit of song.
Yeah. Yeah, all right.
But
So I want to go to the college thing, and this is kind of it's a tail off of, I think we covered it maybe in the last episode or the episode before. You said it took off in college. I guess my question is, why? What was there in college that really kind of set the tone, and like that's when your addiction grabbed hold?
I think an easy answer for me was zero accountability. I went, like, growing up as a kid, I know I eventually tried drugs, tried alcohol, but the DARE program, like as a young kid, worked on me to a T. And so I didn't want to I thought if I tried it, it was the worst thing in the world. But then once I got to school, I went 3 hours away from home. I had no parents, no one telling me, hey, you have to be here, you have to be there, and this is what you have to do. And I remember I so easily the first couple of days at school could have went to the dorm outing, the meet and greet. You know, we're going to have some pizza, going to have some Kool-Aid with everyone on your dorm floor. But I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I can go literally right across the street from my dorm. A kid who was a year older than me from my high school lived in a house, and he had 2 kegs on his porch. Why would I go to the football stadium and get a free t-shirt and learn about orientation for the first week of college when I can go really learn about the first week of the orientation process of college, you know, with drugs and alcohol?
That's the thing with college. And I mean, I never went to a 4-year university or anything. I did technical school and stuff, but a lot of my friends did. And man, the kegs on the porch, that was the thing, you know? I remember going to Clarion for Autumn Leaf Festival, and every single house had kegs on the porch, and you would just go house to house to house to house and, you know, do a keg stand at each one, you know, and see how many houses you can hit before you fall over, smack your head on the sidewalk. And, you know, one thing that we, and I'm curious to know your input on this, is the bonds that it created, you know, and I think a lot of times we shy away from, because we're so used to the crazy shit per se that drugs and alcohol causes us. But there is a point in time where drugs and alcohol, I do believe firmly that it does create bonds between people. It draws people closer. What was that like for you in college? Because, you know, especially WVU, it's you know, there's a lot of partying going on there. Did you notice that for you, or were you more like somebody that was just going to isolate and use, or did it bring you closer to people?
Absolutely. I think I used it as a social lubricant to sort of get out of my shell. And it helped me do that, right? It helped in the social aspect until it didn't. But for a while, it helped immensely. You know, I'm not the type of person to just go up to a group of people that I don't know or I'm not comfortable with and just start shooting the breeze with them. I need a little bit of a push, and that's what substances allow me to do. And it helped, helped big time. And again, until it didn't, because it just continued to progress. And I sort of, the way I drank and used drugs sort of turned a lot of people off. Not everyone drank and used the way that I did. So I sort of just kept progressing to a different group of people that sort of matched the way I did drugs and drank alcohol, again, until it didn't.
Till you were isolated.
You were talking about the Hallmark family, you know, picture there for a second. I always wonder about this. You know, I feel like, would you have considered it like sheltered, so to speak?
Yeah, if you look at the definition of what if in your mind, absolutely, I would. Yeah,
that, because I always look at, because I've been hearing this a lot lately. You know, kids go off to college, and not good, bad, nor indifferent. You know, it goes back to those 3 C's. Can't control it. You didn't cause it. Can't cure it. Like, as a parent, you know, again, not good, bad, nor indifferent, but a lot of times I feel like, you know, you have that experience in college that first time, and you're like, wow, that was exciting. I need more of this, you know? So it's tough to watch that and, you know, look back at the shoulda, woulda, coulda as a parent. Like, you know, I try to be pretty open with my kids on, like, you know, if they let them know, like, you can come to me about anything, these things are going to be out there. Like, it's, you know, a lot of that stuff happened for me because, you know, I grew up, my parents are awesome, you know, grew up in a good home. But like when I started to experience that stuff, I didn't know that whole world existed. And I'm like, give me more of that.
Of course.
You know, rather than a little bit at a time.
I mean, it gives you a sense of freedom, you know, in a way when you're able to, and this for me was whenever I got my driver's license. And I talk about this all the time. It was, you know, I grew up with a single dad. It was just him and I. And, you know, he did the best he could with what he had. I mean, he had to work and provide and everything else. But man, when I got my driver's license, that was it. That was like adulthood for me. And, you know, my dad was pretty much like, you know, don't kill yourself. Don't kill anybody else. And I'll see you tonight, you know, and that's the way that it was. And looking back on it, could he have done things differently? Sure. But, you know, it is what it is, and I'm grateful that I went through that. And, So all
I
right.
think it's important to note, not to cut you off there, but I think ultimately with the benefit of hindsight and a little bit of time under my recovery belt, I realized that I wasn't drinking and using drugs to the extent that I was just because I was away at school for the first time and had all this opportunity to do so. I was using and drinking to do something, to run from something, to suffocate some feeling or emotion. I didn't know it then, and I didn't learn that until I got into the recovery process. But just to I don't want to scare any viewers or listeners. Don't send your kids to college. No, send them to school if that's an appropriate place for them. Not everyone's going to react the way that I did.
Well, I always have a saying, this goes for recovery. You could apply it to anything in life. You can't deny somebody their experience.
Mm-hmm.
You can give everybody the same experience and have infinite different outcomes. Some people go away to college and flourish. Guy like me definitely wouldn't have.
I do want to get to that, what you said, because that's a good point to bring up, and we talk about it a lot. But take us now through, you graduated college. What was your degree?
Broadcast.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What'd you want to do with that?
Sports. I worked at the college radio station there in Morgantown, and I got a couple of side gigs here and there because of that work, and I absolutely loved it. And but at that time, the drugs and alcohol was on the upward climb of that roller coaster. So here I am. I get to travel all over the country with Division I sports team. It was awesome. But I'm at the same time turning down some trips because I know I can't take what I need to California with the women's basketball team because I don't want to risk getting caught with what I need. If I'm going to be gone for 6 days, I need some supplies. And I'm not just talking about luggage and spare set of underwear.
Oh, man. So how do you think that impacted your career if you were to look at it now? If you were, I'm not going to say clean and sober, you just weren't a drug addict. You were just a normal person. I mean, how do you think that affected your potential, I suppose?
Well, I mean, it's really plain for me to see. I let my... It's weird to call it success, but I was the sports director at my radio station. I was on TV sometimes. I had this for a 21, 22-year-old kid. I had a little bit of a status, and I let that get way right to my head, right? And I thought that ESPN was going to come knocking at my door and offer me the Monday Night Football job, and so I didn't look. So I didn't look for work, and I'm not putting together like a demo reel and like my radio tapes and my my examples and my tryout resume tapes for the journalism side of things. I just thought that, don't they listen to 91.7 in Morgantown, West Virginia, and don't they hear me, and aren't they going to just offer me the job? And so I graduated in December of 2010, and there were 0 suitors because I did not get out and pound the pavement and look at all.
There is so much there. Like when we go into treatment, the clinical team often talks about the underlying issues, and how many of us have passed on opportunities because of exactly what, if you look at Bill W., the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, for instance, it talks about in his story, rather than quitting his drinking, he played more golf because golf permits drinking. Here you are missing trips. For myself, I had a bartending gig and I didn't go away to college because I was like, well, I make really good money here and everything I need is here. So I passed on opportunities. It's so common to be able to do that, and what you were just sharing about ESPN's going to come knock on your door. Bill W.'s story talks about that too. I'm basically in layman's terms, I'm going to get what the world owes me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be at the head of vast enterprises, in this case, ESPN. There's so many, and that's what they refer to. Got brought up at our family weekend this week. The isms that they talk about, all that stuff is there, and it's so evident. So it's not the details necessarily that are important, but those patterns. I feel like all alcoholics and drug addicts just about fit some sort of bill with what you said.
It makes us compromise on everything, if you really think about it, because if you are a true drug addict and you're a true alcoholic, you are willing to compromise just about anything that is of any value to you. And I was the same way. I was a golfer, loved golf and loved doing all these things, archery, how we were talking about before we started recording. I had all these things that I thoroughly loved and enjoyed. But as soon as I couldn't drink and do these things, that was it. In golf, you could drink and play golf. But going back to what you were saying, like your friends group changed. The people that I golfed with couldn't drink the way that I drank. And then eventually I just drank to the point where I was embarrassed to go golf with them because, you know, they would just say, hey, man, like, do you need to have another 15 beers? You know? And it was like it got to the point where I was ashamed of the amount that I was consuming, that it just isolated me. But I isolated myself in a bar with people that could consume as much booze as me. And that's where it really takes you to, which is scary. It's a scary place to be.
That's all. I just want to point out, find what you can relate to, because a lot of times we'll have loved ones call in and they're like, my son, he's a college guy, he's well educated, and he's not like everybody else. But again, like those details doesn't matter. It's not like a status thing, so to speak.
It's just like Jim and Fred in the big book, and the unnamed third person in that same chapter. They're all well-to-do people and have good jobs, good families. So yeah,
we see it with our clients here too. We get the professionals in here.
So I want to get now to when you got clean and sober. I mean, you obviously went down a rough path, I suppose the best way to put it. When was enough enough? Take us there.
Well, I mean, enough was enough way before I realized it was enough. I think a lot of people can relate to that. The last couple of years it was so monotonous and mundane. It was like the Bill Murray movie, The Groundhog's Day. Every day is the same. Wake up and realize that I don't have what I need to get out of bed most mornings or operate at all. And but continue to do that. It's just an endless rat race. So the last couple of years was just dreadful, complete isolation. I still worked. I had a good job with the state of Pennsylvania, but it was just, I just let it all go, right? And I gave it all away. Nothing bad happened to me. It was all my own doing. But so April of 2014, I did what heroin addicts have to do. And I, broke the law and got caught. And I was lucky enough to be presented with an opportunity. Hey, you want to go to jail or do you want to be in treatment before the end of the day? And I chose the latter.
And where did you went to treatment in Pennsylvania?
In Pennsylvania, yep.
What was that like? It was your first time walking into treatment. What was going through your head?
Well, I thought that I could talk my way out of it, right? So when the police officer presents me and then my mother, because any strong 26-year-old man, in a situation like this isn't going to face it alone, right? So my mom's next to me in the police station doing all this, and she's like, oh, don't worry, officer, he'll go to treatment today. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, there's no way I'm going to treatment today. Not a chance. And we drive home, and here now thinking about it, it's funny. My mother packed my bag for treatment, right? And she's on the phone trying to find me a place to go, and she's packing the bag. And between us, she did a terrible job of packing the bag. I was doing laundry the whole time I was in treatment. It was just awful. But I was until we were in the car on the way, about an hour drive from where my parents lived, I didn't realize, it didn't hit me that this was actually going to happen until we drove up the little mountain to where I went to treatment. And sitting in the lobby, already starting to, detox, that's when it hit me. And then watching her go, and then me just sitting on this sofa before the intake process started, what a terrible feeling. And scared, fear out the wazoo, right? And I had no idea what was next because it was my first time.
And how many times have you been to treatment, or was that it?
Fortunately, that's it. Yep.
There's two of us here, Ben.
Man, I'm outnumbered for the first time ever.
I did treatment one time. And okay, so I want to ask you this. What's your, thought process on that? Because there's not many of us.
Mm-hmm.
Many people go to treatment, 3, 10, 20 times. What's your thoughts on the one and done mentality?
It's 100% doable. It's achievable, but I I mean, I know what worked for me. It took me about it took me about a week in treatment to get to this stage, but I took stock of what was going on with me. And I was like, okay, you're 26 years old. You just got arrested. You just got fired. You don't have any money in your bank account. You still live at home with mom and dad. You don't pay any of your own bills. What's going positive for you? And it was very easy and clear for me to see that not much. So I had to, and I had a great therapist where I went to treatment who was in the program, and he just said, hey, why don't you listen to somebody else for once and see what happens? And that's really ultimately the willingness was sparked, and I just became willing to listen, not all the time. I still held on to my own ideas sometimes, but the general idea of just saying, okay, yeah, you know what's best. I clearly don't. And that just started the process.
April what?
21st. Had to get one last 420 in,
Ben and I are born April 7th, 1984. Both, like literally same day, same year.
Wow.
Is that crazy?
That is crazy.
Yeah. I got sober at 26.
26, me too.
Ben, you were 26. 27.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd have to do the math, but yeah, because I'm December 8th, so it's like
you're 2 months. Yeah, you were 26.
yeah.
I know you always look at me funny whenever I say that.
I never sat down and did the math. It felt like I was older, I guess.
It's just one day at a time, Ben.
If you just asked me and I didn't sit there and do the math, I would have told you I was like almost 30 or something.
Almost 30 years old?
Yeah, like not doing that. I just felt that way. Like I was so beat up and so tired. It felt like I'd been doing it for so long.
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like the direction that this is going. The one and done, again, going back to, we don't see a lot of that. So let's kind of unpack your recovery now, because you have what, nine years?
8 and some change. Next April 21st would be 9. Yeah.
All right. So God willing, you'll make it that far.
Yeah, I got to stay willing, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like for you, like the first couple years? I know before we started recording, you were talking about some stuff, and I know we wanted to head in that direction, but what were some major, I suppose, mindset shifts that you had to have? Like, what were some of the biggest things that you took away out of your first couple of years that you really started to understand, okay, this is pretty cool, this is working?
Well, for me, and it's I don't want to speak for everybody, but a big part of my recovery process is my program of recovery. I was fortunate enough to sort of be thrust into recovery housing, where I thought I was going to stay for 30 days at the most, and I ended up living there for over 8 months. And where I lived, we had to get a sponsor. We had to actually write his name and number on the dry erase board right inside the front door. So for accountability, you can't just go and say, Joe Smith's my sponsor, and not put a phone number, because the house manager, he's crazy enough to call him. And so the first night out of treatment, Wednesday night in May of 2014, I went to a huge speaker meeting, feared up. And I remember my sponsor looked at me and said, it's real easy. Ask the happiest person in the room. The happiest man in the room. And I looked around and I waited a few minutes, and I realized from when he said that to a few minutes later, a smile had not left his face. And I said, all right, well, this must got to be the guy I ask. And we just hit the ground running right away. And the first, year and a half, I was so conditioned to, I'll tell a quick story. I'm a rule follower. That's just my nature. So when I was in treatment, I was scared if I broke the rules, I'd get kicked out. Now I know the way most treatment centers work, they're not just kicking everybody out for not making their bed in the morning. But I was under the mindset, if I missed group, I was getting kicked out. If I didn't have a clean room, I'm out. And I remember the first day at my recovery house, my house manager's, most important thing for him, he walked me to the ATM machine to get the rent. But we were walking around the city of Lancaster, and I'm about ready to jaywalk. And he's like, whoa, no jaywalking. The cops, they'll get you for that in this town. And I looked at him, and this guy's in his 50s. I said, are you serious? They're not going to arrest anybody for jaywalking. And he's like, no, it's going to happen. So and I was on the Shoe Leather Express my whole first year of recovery. No car, a lot of bus passes and a lot of walking. And I remember I didn't jaywalk at all that first while I lived in Lancaster City, because I just had that voice in the back of my head that I was going to get popped for jaywalking. And that's how I was in recovery. My sponsor told me to read this. I went and read that, and he told me to do whatever it took in the program, and I tried my best to do that. And it was tedious during it, but it was so the payback and the payoff was so rewarding because of what came from that work.
Do you still talk to that guy?
Still,
your sponsor?
Just saw him. I was just up in Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago.
That's awesome. Ben, what do you got on that?
Don't be the jaywalker.
Right. And then we cracked the book and we learned about a jaywalker in there too.
Yeah.
You know?
It is. It is the little things though. Like something that's as trivial as that. We were actually just doing group on this yesterday, how like all the major big negative events in your life, like we manage those somehow. It's all the little things that get, if I start taking shortcuts here, shortcuts there, those are the things that take me back out. You know, again, jaywalking sounds trivial, but like I like the rule follower thing. I'm a rule follower myself, I feel like.
Ben is by far a rule follower. I mean, it's by the book Ben is.
But it also gives me anxiety too, like at the same time, like, oh my God. But,
right.
you know.
We have catastrophic thinking. If if my boss calls me and she says, hey, come meet me, and if it's a 30 minutes until I go meet with her, in that 30 minutes, I'm fired, going to the unemployment line, my car gets repossessed, the wife thinks, starts to reconsider what's going on at home. And all she wanted to do is like, tell me good job. My head goes to like the far worse spots.
That's, again, like I keep coming back to like the isms, so to speak. I never use the term isms, do I? Today I'm feeling it. But like going back to that, like that, what it's like to, because you've probably been that way your whole life, right? And like that's like probably something that the alcohol and drugs, at least for me, gave relief to.
Right.
Under constant tension and pressure. And like just that having a drink gave me some relief.
Yep.
It didn't matter what it was. Like if you mentioned earlier like the social lubricant effect that alcohol gave you and drugs, the connection helped you in college. Like I needed that. Because even going into a social situation, like I'm under this intense pressure, and that's what helped me get through, until it became a problem and didn't work anymore.
Right.
So how'd you find your way to Florida?
Well, great story. So I mentioned a couple of my jobs in early recovery, and so I got fired from the state, and I had worked there for about 3 years. So I had a little bit of like a 401k retirement set up. So I had a little bit of like very little bit of money that I could, pay my rent and buy my Monster Energy drinks and, my Marlboro Reds. And,
Cowboy.
Cowboy.
I could buy that stuff. And then I had to work. That's the rules of the recovery house. So I got this part-time job as a janitor. And it was like better than a janitor, not to discredit the profession, but here I am, college graduate, mopping floors, vacuuming, cleaning baseboards, and just messing around with a couple of my roommates. And we do some jobs. And one day the guy that hired us called us over and he's like, "You guys are done." It's like, what? And we got fired as a janitor. And I got fired. And I was a telemarketer. And I got fired from that too. So
how'd you get fired from all these jobs?
Just not being a good person. Take away the drugs, take away the alcohol. It still left me, but I had not made the necessary changes at that point. And so it came back to bite me. And but fortunately, that place where I was a telemarketer, they hired me back, and I worked for this company. It was a home improvement company for about 2 years, and then I went to work for the treatment center I went to, and it was weird. In 2015, I got offered to move to Sanford, Florida, and I was on board, right? And I said, okay, we're good. I told my family that the move to Florida is probably going to happen, but in the meantime, before the opportunity presented itself to the actual move date, I fell in love, right? I met this girl. We were going to save the recovery community in Lancaster. She was in the program. She sponsored a bunch of women. I was active in my program, and we were just going to be Captain and Mrs. and Mr. Recovery of the city of Lancaster, and we're going to save the world. And we move eventually. It starts to get more serious, and I went to my job and said, "This is the one. I can't move to Florida because of the girl." And lo and behold, 3 months later, she's gone. She left, and that was that. But almost a year later, I got offered to move to Florida again. I said, you know what? This might be a sign. And so I moved to Florida at the end of 2016.
The girl. I mean, what? So two things that I want to spend just a little bit of time on. One, just because we put down the drink and the drug doesn't mean that we're a good person. Share a little bit on that. Like, what was it that kept you at? Because when people get clean and sober, I mean, we preach this a lot. Like, you shouldn't get fired from a job. I expect
Twice.
to get fired from a job when I'm using and when I'm showing up to work drunk, but now I'm sober. Generally speaking, you don't get fired from jobs, and this happened to you twice. So what'd you miss?
The change that is required that we all have to make of just daily behavior. You mentioned it, it's the little things. It's being on time. It's being honest. Like being a man of your word. I didn't know what that meant. This guy took it out of the kindness of his heart. This older guy, he was retired. He had this business on the side, and he's helping 3 men in early recovery with his job. He paid us $20 an hour, which was unheard of for a lot of the guys in the recovery house scene then. And he lets us come, work part-time for him. And we repay him by taking 90-minute lunch breaks and smoking cigarettes all day long on the job site where, someone hired him and his company, and he brings us. And what kind of look are we for him? And we didn't even consider that. And he just had enough. And I don't blame him 1 second for letting us go, because he had to. It was his business on the line, not ours. And the telemarketing thing, I was just I'm a big fan. I'm a big wrestling fan. You see this shirt. I was a big jabroni, right? Like The Rock used to say, talking about jabronis. And I worked at this telemarketing place, and I would spend time off the phone. I'd be just carrying on with my coworkers. I wasn't doing the job that I was hired to do. So they let me go. Shocker. Of course, I took it so personally, and I was like, how could they fire me? But I didn't do what they hired me to do.
And looking back on it now, they had every right in the world to fire you.
The great part about having so many different guests on this show is we get to see so much evidence of these patterns. I think probably Tom was going there with this, but I mean, for myself, I definitely needed those 2 years. I worked for a moving company. I talk about that all the time. I came so close to getting fired. I got written up. I got in a fist fight in the back, all kinds of stuff, but you had 2 years when you got into the recovery industry?
Just under 2 years. Yep.
Are you glad that it worked that way? Like, as far as the time stamp on that?
I think so, because what I learned in those 2 years are things that I still, draw on today. I wasn't ready. I don't think I was ready when I started working in the recovery field. And I think it took me, I bumped my head against the wall in a number of different ways once I started working in this space. And I had to learn some lessons here and there. Like, my recovery is different, completely separate from what I do at work. And I can't enmesh the two. And I can't slack off on my personal recovery just because I work in recovery. They're completely independent of each other.
Amen to that. And because a lot of times, for instance, we'll get parents that'll send their son or daughter here. And one of the things that the parents will bring up is, hey, when they graduate your program, they want to do what you do. And I have to tell them, hey, pump the brakes. I had 2 years under my belt, and I'll agree with you on that. Like, even at 2 years, I don't think I was necessarily ready to do it. I adapted very quick and made those changes really quick because I began to notice for myself, I'm supposed to be an example to the people that I'm overseeing in the treatment process as a professional. I better start acting professional. I better stop being a hypocrite. And also, honestly, like, my recovery took off also big time on a personal level because I didn't want to be a hypocrite. Call it ego if you will, but here I am, like, I better practice what I preach because here I am working in treatment. I'm supposed to be an example of how these people are supposed to be living their lives, what action they're supposed to be taking. And I, quietly in the beginning, like, I'm sitting back taking my own inventory, like, I'm giving out a lot of suggestions. How many am I following?
Right.
And I really stepped up my game, but, I really do. And, it gets brought up a lot. People want to end up working in this field. You get clean and sober, you're excited about it, you're on fire. But there was so much I had to learn about life, business, being a professional. I had to learn how to be an employee and not get fired from a simple job. And like Tom said earlier, we shouldn't be getting fired from jobs, but we have to have those experiences. Who am I to go have, for what it's worth, not good, bad, nor indifferent, but 90 days of sobriety, go start telling other people how to live their lives. It's not right.
Yeah, slippery slope.
Mm-hmm.
Random question, since you're a wrestling fan, do you remember Mark Smelly Bell?
Mark Bell. I don't know. The name doesn't ring a bell. Pun is sort of intended there, but no.
I don't know. I don't know how long he wrestled for, but Ben and I podcasted with him. Or no, Ben didn't. I did.
No, I didn't.
This was
2019.
Yeah, this is a long time. But he was in wrestling. He's a big power lifter,
Okay.
like big. I'll show you after we're done.
I didn't know he wrestled.
Yeah, he had a short stint of time. Him, his brother Chris Bell. Well, let me ask you this: Chris Bell has produced a couple of movies. One is Prescription Thugs. Do you recall the movie Bigger, Stronger, Faster?
Just by title.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was like a Netflix documentary or something.
Yeah, well, Bigger, Stronger, Faster it's an old movie about steroids. And,
yep.
Yeah. And then he just came out with another one not too long ago called A Leaf of Faith. And it's a documentary about Kratom. More of the like pro Kratom type documentary, because he's the brother Chris Bell is a recovering addict as well, and he's very open about his Kratom use, but he also talks about how he's had double hip replacements and he has chronic pain every day, and how Kratom has helped him with that. So, but yeah, his brother Mark was in WWF.
I think now that you're mentioning, I think I did watch a documentary about it's three brothers, but I think one might have passed away.
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the third brother was there was Mark Bell, Chris Bell, and the one that passed away, I can't remember his first name. Mike, maybe? I don't know, but the oldest brother died from opiates.
Mm-hmm.
And I had always followed Mark Bell for a long time because he's big into powerlifting. He's got a really big social media following, huge podcast, and I just randomly sent a message to him and his team, and they were like, yeah, sure, well, he'll come on. So I actually flew out to California and recorded with him, and it was pretty cool.
Just for the record, we are not advocates of kratom in early recovery.
No, we're not. No. No. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm going to fall in your camp with that one.
Yeah. I don't even want to go down that.
No, we have
got
past episodes. I just wanted to throw that out there in a quick blip.
Got enough hate mail.
Yeah. It's a pathway.
Yeah.
I'll acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And it is a bigger discussion than just a black and white. I'm not an advocate for it,
So
much bigger.
For the sake of time, I want to just get to two more things, and you'll have opportunity to, if you have something that you want to discuss. I want to talk a little bit about the person or the family that's listening to this, that their son or daughter or themselves or their spouse or somebody is just about to enter into the treatment. part of their life. You know, they don't know what to expect. They have no idea. They've probably been listening to this podcast long enough to understand that there's not a lot of people that get this on their first shot. But I do want you to give maybe some points of an action plan, I suppose. What are some things that they can do as a family, and what can that person do as an addict to really try and ensure that they only go through this one time?
Great question. I wish we could bottle up and sell the answer. I think the answer is different for everybody, but what I would suggest is for both the families, the loved ones, the support, and the person that's experiencing the substance use or the drug use, you have to talk about it. It has to be brought to the surface. Nothing's going to be done about it until it's actually there and on the table to look at. And I think that's what personally held me back for so long, is I tried to hide it, and I thought no one knew about it. But once the arrest did happen and then people knew, I sort of was forced into doing something about it. So I encourage, and I know it's, that unfortunately there's still a stigma that's present. I think the stigma has been worked on over the last 5-10 years or so, but the stigma is still there, but talk about it anyway. Like, you're not going to get suggestions for help or ideas about what to do unless you talk about it with people. So seek out professional opinions and help. Just don't go down to the grocery store and, pick a flyer off the wall. Like, do some research, because there's so many different ways to go about this. But for the person that's experiencing it and about to, embark on this crazy, wild journey for the first time, go for it. Do it. Start it. Just do something. I'm a big believer, and I mention it a lot to the patients and the clients that I come across, and men in the program. What's the negative of giving it a shot? If you try it and it doesn't work, you're not going to be worse off than you were. So just go ahead and do it.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because, as our listeners know, I went to treatment a lot of times over a lot of years. I spent about 8 years wanting to be sober. And honestly, I can look back and say, I really, really tried at points and just never gave up, and I like what you said. Like, I never ended up worse as a result of the things that I did. My addiction got worse, but it wasn't because I sought out help or made an effort to get sober. It's a really good point.
And I just remembered you said this, so I want to just spend a minute on it. At one point, you weighed 250 pounds.
Right. Yeah, right after treatment. Sometime in the spring, early summer of 2014. I've had a fluctuating weight my whole life. So I was heavy in high school, lost a bunch of weight in between my junior and senior year, and then college just sort of maintained. But after, from 22 to 26, it just, gained, just steady gain. So yeah, I went to treatment and got out of treatment, was very unhealthy. I didn't take care of myself from top to bottom, and then of course, like the 11:30 recovery house Stromboli didn't help, every night, but I think a big part of at least my own story is the working out. And I'm fortunate I have a twin sister who was big in like the workout. She's like a trainer, and she ran some classes. And so she got me just to do this simple a 25-minute workout every day. And I started doing that in the living room of this recovery house. And my roommates looked at me like, this guy's crazy. He's never going to stick with it. But it just kept working. And I, similar to recovery, once you start to see a little bit of results and something tangible, I sort of just got hooked to it. And my own exercise and lifestyle sort of is a huge part of my daily life today.
I wanted to ask, go ahead, Ben.
I was going to ask you that. Do you think improving there helped you to stay sober?
Of course, because it's about, like you mentioned earlier, there's things that aren't just relevant in the recovery space, but in all of life. Working out, sticking to a schedule, watching what I'm eating, those things are all, it's discipline and it's routine and it's structure. And I do well in that setting once I get established with something, but I can carry those things into my recovery and just life, like, being in relationships, being an employee. If I'm structured and have a plan and have a little bit of discipline, that's going to go a far way.
What does what's your exercise and stuff look like now? I mean, what do you weigh now?
175 pounds.
Dang.
Give or take.
75 or 7, you lost 75 pounds. What do you do now? Like, do you do sports? What do you do?
I do love sports. When I lived down in this area, I was in an adult baseball league. We played Sunday mornings. That was fun. I was definitely the oldest guy on my team by a lot, like mostly like kids right out of high school, some in college, but played baseball, and I've umpired baseball for over 20 years now. Need to get back into doing that. I have a little one at home, so that takes up most of my time. But I love sports, but my workout, I work out in my garage. I have a set of adjustable dumbbells. I love push-ups. I do 500 push-ups a day. My workout take about 40 minutes, and I do them bright and early, about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and that's my day.
Simple.
It's at this point, it's so like second nature to me, but I'm sort of like neurotic with it. If I miss a day, it's in my head. Right. I traveled a couple weeks ago and I'm like, hey, I missed 3 straight days of working out, and then I'm in my parents' basement doing like hack squats and push-ups instead of my normal stuff. But yeah, that's much healthier than what I used to do.
That goes back to the rule follower trait.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It can be good too. It can be a liability and it can be an asset.
Right.
Well, and I think people set the expectation, and I'm one to do this too. It's hard for me. I need to have, and I'm going through this right now. I'm so used to following a program. Like, I need to know what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, how many reps, what's the rest time, so on and so forth, and what's the end goal. And what I'm going through right now is more on the nutritional side of things, and the training is a style that I'm just not used to, and it's extremely uncomfortable. And Ben knows what I'm talking about, but I'm used to more powerlifting specific, lifts around the big 3, squat, bench, and deadlift. And now it's just a bunch of high rep hypertrophy, like split workouts, and it's driving me crazy. But I say all this with like, a lot of times people fail to bring this to the table when it comes to recovery, because you're somebody, you weighed 250 pounds when you decided to get clean and sober. And I'm willing to bet that had you not made a lifestyle change in terms of your health and nutrition and exercise, would you have relapsed? I don't know. Who knows? I mean, that's going to be contingent on a lot of things, but you wouldn't be where you're at.
Right. Things would have been way, way different for sure.
So we fail to bring that to light about the emotional, the mental capacity or the impacts that stuff has on us. And man, I'm glad to see that you're doing that. And, I think that's pretty cool. You got a little one. How old?
He turned 2 in December.
Nice.
Yep. A lot of fun.
What's his name?
His name, we call him Anders. That's his middle name, Anders. But I named him after my dad. So he's Thomas Anders Boyer II.
Thomas Anders Boyer II.
That's right.
Nice. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I want to give you a few minutes, talk about what you're doing now, who you're working for, what you're doing, and Ben and I are obviously familiar, but you can say their name, shameless plugs, whatever.
Sure. Well, I keep it real simple. I work for an inpatient treatment center in Tequesta, Florida. It's called Futures Recovery Healthcare, detox, residential, some partial that we can do on the grounds there. It's everyone's going to stay there. But we have 4 different programs. 3 are primary substance with co-occurring, and then we have a standalone mental health program. There's no clinical overlap of any of those 4, so it's all separate staff, separate clinical programs. All the ancillary extra stuff in the evenings, a chance for the community to mix. But that's where I work. We do a great job there. It's in Tequesta, Florida. Big thing I wanted to mention, just to piggyback what you just said, and for those that are listening and watching, it's so much more than the substance, right? I always It's cliche. I hear it all the time in meetings. It's easier to get sober than to stay sober. And I always tell people when I'm like doing a group or anything like that, I always ask people, how many people have relapsed before? And, most of the hands shoot up. And I always say, think about when you did that, when you resumed use, you were in reality sober when it happened. So it's not the substance that made you do it again. It's something inside of us. And I think it's a big thing for people to know. It's be so much different. And my mom was guilty of it. When I went to treatment and came home, she said, "Oh, you're good now, right? All set." And it's not like that. And people you still go to meetings, and yeah, I go to meetings, and well, why? Well, it's because that's what got me to where I'm at now. It's just, we can't just turn it off. It's not a race that we're finishing and we break across that banner and stand on the podium, but it's not like that. It's not a race, not a test.
Yeah.
It's like saying you lost 75 pounds. Why keep working out?
Exactly, right?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Well, that's cool, man. I'm glad that you came on. I had fun. Did you, Ben?
Yeah, no, it's awesome getting to know somebody. We literally have never met until sitting down at this table.
Yeah. And Futures, for those of you listening and watching, is a beautiful facility. I remember walking in there the first time. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
place is nice.
That's how we got the introduction.
Yep.
Is a lot because we do PHP IOP at Rock.
Yeah.
We'll utilize y'all for detox residential.
Yep.
Yeah.
And likewise with
Services.
us, with our patients that are leaving, we, the appropriate ones we send down here to you guys. We know you're structured and real program oriented, which I wished all of discharging clients would be, but it's not the case for everybody. But
Yeah.
Solid programs have to stick together.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, dude.
Ben, any final thoughts?
No, thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
That was
guys.
awesome.
That is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always email us, Tom at realrecoverytalk.com and Ben at realrecoverytalk.com. That is it. We will see y'all later.